Thank you for joining us on this Memorial Day. We really appreciate it. I would like to start by recognizing the Reagan Foundation Institute President and CEO Dave Trulio, who's here with his family. And then I also believe if they were able to come, we have a few Vietnam veterans with us. I believe we even have a World War II veteran with us. If you were able to come, if you could stand so we could thank you for your service. What an honor to have you all with us. Thank you so much. Before we go any further, I would, of course, like to thank Thomas Baker. He's sitting over there. He's a veteran who served in the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, and the Air Force. He played the harp for us today. And, of course, the Los Angeles Police Concert Band for such a wonderful beginning to today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the March On of the Colors by the Ronald Reagan Detachment 597 Marine Corps League, the playing of our national anthem, and the invocation by Aristotle Rivera, Chaplain, Naval Base, Ventura County. Parade the colors.
Let us pray. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, on this day of Memorial Day, we remember and give thanks for those who have given their lives in the service of our country. We pray for those who made the ultimate sacrifice, those men and women in service to our nation who died to protect our freedom and the freedom of others in our world. When the need was greatest, they stepped forward and did their duty to defend the freedoms that we enjoy and to win the same for others. All gave some gave all. Oh God, you yourself taught us that there is no love greater than this, that which one gives to lay down his life for his friends. These honored dead gave the most precious gift they had, life itself. For loved ones, they gave for loved ones, for neighbors, they gave for troops, for country, they gave for us. Help us to honor their memory. Help us to honor their legacy by how we live, that we may commit ourselves to be vigilant in our love for others, for our nation, to be courageous for the cause of freedom, to be audacious in protecting peace throughout the world. Holy One, help us to remember that freedom is not free, that there is a cost and it is indeed dear. So never let us forget those who paid so terrible a price. Though their names may fade with the passing of generations, may we never forget what they have done. Help us to be worthy of their sacrifice. Oh God, help us to be worthy. Eternal rest grant upon our fallen. Let light perpetual shine upon them. May their souls and the souls of all our deported warriors rest in peace and rise in your glory. Amen.
Retire the colors. Thank you. Please be seated. President Ronald Reagan had profound love for America and unwavering support for its guardians in uniform. He knew it was the men and women in uniform who embodied the nation's enduring values of freedom, bravery, and peace. He also recognized the sacrifices made by service members and their families for our country's freedom. It is remembering and honoring these fallen servicemen and women that is the purpose of Memorial Day, a day to remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. As President Reagan said in 1982, Memorial Day is a day for a strong and good nation to stand in silence and remember those who were loved and who, in return, loved their countrymen enough to die for them. In honor of these men and women, heroes all, may I please ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now to today's program. Our first speaker is a true man of honor. His awards include the Legion of Merit, the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, and various unit commendations and service campaign awards. When we started planning our Memorial Day program, we knew it wouldn't be complete without him as our speaker. To us, he is not just the commanding officer of Naval Base Ventura County. We like to think of him as a friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Robert Kimnock III.
Thank you, Melissa, for the kind introduction. Always an honor to be here at the library. The library's been a great friend of Naval Base Ventura County, and every opportunity that I have to come over here, we're here. So thank you again for having us. Greetings to our distinguished guests and especially our Gold Star family members here today. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Navy. It's especially humbling to be here in uniform here at the library again and reflect on those who answered the call to service and paid the ultimate price to preserve the freedoms we cherish today. I'd like to take a moment to again recognize those of us here today, this morning, who have served and are currently serving, as well as all of those of you here today who have lost a loved one in the service to our nation. We're humbled by your great sacrifices and commend the often unseen and unrecognized courage and strength that you have shown throughout the most difficult times. I'd like to thank the color guard here this morning as well for coming out. Chaplain Rivera, nice job as always. That's a Navy lieutenant who knows how to project. It's too bad about the flyover, but you did get a naval aviator here, so I'm happy to talk to anyone about flying. Just ask me. We can talk about for hours. I bet there's a few other any other naval aviators out there? There we go. We got a few. Thank you for your service. I'm also proud to have my family here today. I'm what we call a geographic bachelor in the service. I think most of you know what that means, but I've lived apart from my family for 3 years up here as I served as a commanding officer Naval Base Ventura County. Coming towards the end of the tour and looking forward to getting home. But my family was able to make it up today. So Rachel, Jake, Grace, Sally, welcome to one of our functions. You finally got to make it. So nice to have you all here today. All right, last November on Veterans Day, we honored the 16 and a half living veterans who have answered the call of service. Then earlier this month, Armed Services Day recognized the almost 1.4 million men and women who are currently serving on active duty. And then today, Memorial Day, a tradition dating back to the Civil War, will focus on those who have given their lives in service, not just in war, but in peacetime. Previously known as Decoration Day because of its tradition of decorating the graves of fallen Civil War soldiers, Memorial Day is intended to honor military members who have died while serving their country. Since our nation declared independence in 1776, over 1.3 million men and women have given their lives in combat. However, everyone who has served knows that combat is not the only source of danger in our military lives. And sometimes training can be just as costly. Accidents, injuries, and suicides are a grim reality in our world, and we would be remiss if we didn't also recognize those non-combat sacrifices. We must always remember that great costs come with our military service, even in peacetime. In honoring those who have fallen today, we also want to thank those who are currently serving. This includes over 4,000 active service members on board Naval Base Ventura County, some of whom are on watch right now. The Fighting Seabees, supporting partners in the Indo-Pacific region, our Carrier Airborne Early Warning Squadrons, supporting carrier strike groups, currently operate in the 7th, 5th, and 6th Fleet on board our aircraft carriers. Then many units who have soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines deployed on individual augmentation assignments, including 4 sailors from Mine Command who are spending upwards to a year away from their families to support ongoing missions all over the world. Americans do not forget our service members. Whether today or a century ago, we remember. Just ask the family of ship fitter, 2nd class, Claude Ralph Garcia, assigned to the battleship West Virginia in 1941. During the attack on Pearl Harbor, he became Ventura County's first casualty of the Second World War. Thanks to the incredible efforts of his family and the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, Petty Officer Garcia's remains were identified 81 years later. Finally, in December 2022, with support from Naval Base Ventura County Honor Guard, he was brought home right here to Oxnard and laid to rest. Today, the men and women of Naval Base Ventura County dedicate that tradition of valor, continuing to work with those who have gone before us. In addition to supporting our West Coast Seabeat battalions and Airborne Early Warning Squadrons, Port Hueneme and Point Mugu are becoming the center of the Navy's next generation of unmanned warfighting capabilities, tasked with taking the fight to our adversaries while protecting the lives of our personnel. Our base is home to the advanced systems operating under the water, on the water, and above the water, including the MQ-4 Triton, the MQ-25 Stingray, the Orca Extra Large Unmanned Undersea Vehicle, and the Overlord Unmanned Surface Vessels. We are also growing our research, development, and engineering facilities to support the fleet's sophisticated Aegis Weapons Laboratory and the Navy's only shore-based directed energy system. These systems are built to ensure our Navy succeeds in its long-standing mission to win wars, deter aggression, and maintain freedom of the seas. In 1980, our president, Ronald Reagan, noted, "We maintain the peace through strength. Weakness only invites aggression." Here now, 44 years later, that observation holds more true than ever. And I assure you that the men and women of Naval Base Ventura County are ready as needed to support and defend this country and continue to make us strong. The memory of our fallen service members is a reminder that there will always be threats to our way of life, and the Navy eagerly continues their tradition of maintaining a ready 24/7 watch to meet any threat to American interests or our allies and partners. A quick glance at the recent headlines is further a reminder that there are dangerous actors around the world who seek to do us harm, and, as always, America needs a courageous and well-trained military to give those regimes a moment of pause. We remember that peace is only possible through the world-changing actions of those who stood before us, stood their ground, the communities who rallied behind them, the families that supported them, and the extraordinary men and women who carry the battle flag to far-off lands in defense of our liberty. Thank you again for allowing me to speak. Thank you for those who have served and are currently serving, and may our fallen lay peacefully in rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Kibnock. Those were beautiful. So I believe I met our next speaker back in 2015 when the Reagan Library was planning an exhibition that featured a traveling Vietnam veterans wall. He's remained part of our family ever since. But to properly introduce him, I'd like to talk to you briefly about the setting where we're standing today. To honor the values and ideals for which our country's sons and daughters sacrifice. To honor their commitment to duty and country. To thank them for their service and our freedom, and to make sure they are never, ever forgotten. In 2018, the Reagan Library unveiled our Gold Star Families Memorial Monument, which we're standing next to today, to honor the families of servicemen and servicewomen who sacrificed their lives while serving our country. I'd like to ask if we have any Gold Star family members with us today, and if so, can you please stand so we can thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for being with us today. It means a lot. So our next speaker has become an active voice in the Gold Star family community, and we're so honored to have him with us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tony Cordero.
Good morning. It is an honor for me to stand here and celebrate and commemorate Memorial Day with all of you adjacent to the final resting places of President Reagan and Mrs. Reagan, and adjacent to the Gold Star Family Memorial Monument. Rather than focusing on a single theme, my remarks will be more a compilation of anecdotes related to Memorial Day, and I hope you find some value in them. President Reagan was a hero of mine. In 1993, when my wife Deanna and our family were living in Oregon, I called President Reagan's office in Century City and I asked if he might sign my copy of his autobiography. I knew it was a Hail Mary pass, but I was invited to send the book just to see what might happen. So I penned a letter sharing my story with President Reagan, telling him about our mutual love of California, how we Corderos are an original land-grant family from here in the state, and that our family now has 10 generations of history in Santa Barbara, not far from his beloved Rancho Cielo, and that our dad, Major Bill Cordero, was the first from Santa Barbara to be killed in the Vietnam War. To my surprise, about 6 weeks later, I received the book in the mail with a personal message from President Reagan, and it is an heirloom that my family treasures today and will always treasure. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the Vietnam War Commemoration here. The Vietnam War Commemoration exists to carry on the great American tradition of commemorating the 50th and 100th anniversaries of the ends of all of America's wars. And in this case, they're here commemorating the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. From Memorial Day 2012 until Veterans Day 2025, the commemoration's mission is to honor and to acknowledge all who served and sacrificed during the Vietnam War. So I would encourage you, Vietnam veterans, Blue Star families, and Gold Star families from the Vietnam War, if you have not received that acknowledgement from the Vietnam War commemoration, I would invite you to see the commemoration after the ceremony. They would love to be able to honor you and acknowledge your loved one's service. In July of 1961, I was born right over there, right down the Conejo grade at the old St. John's Hospital in Oxnard. A few months before my birth, in a stroke of good fortune, the Air Force transferred our family from Connally Air Force Base in Waco, Texas, to Oxnard, about 30 miles south of Dad's hometown of Santa Barbara. Dad was in radar intercept training there, navigating the supersonic F-101 Voodoos, and he flew these skies then as I'd like to believe he is today, looking down on this beautiful land and just admiring what a glorious place this is. While flying some of those training missions, Dad reportedly would fly over the Cordero family home in Santa Barbara, and he had it good. He really had it good, living so close to Santa Barbara, flying over your boyhood home, training in multi-million-dollar supersonic jets, and of course, he had his young family with him. He had us living in Camarillo, my brother Bill, my sister Terry, myself, our younger brother Dickie was born in the spring of '63, and Mom. For 2.5 years, that was our family life. Stationed at Oxnard, driving up and down the 101, back and forth from Santa Barbara, and my mind's eye, even though I was just a little 3-year-old kid at the time, my mind's eye can still see, and many of you probably remember this, the Wagon Wheel Junction neon sign right there at the turnoff of the old Highway 1. It's no wonder that Dad called Santa Barbara heaven on earth. In November of 1963, Dad received orders and shipped out from here in Oxnard to join the 1st Air Commando Squadron based at Ben Hoa Air Base there in South Vietnam, just outside Saigon. There he navigated B-26s for nearly a year. And then he accepted a second tour, navigating B-57s based at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. In August of 1964, Mom and her 4 little kids shipped out from here in Oxnard, and we joined Dad at Pampanga in Angeles City in the Philippines. After nearly a year of military separation, when the only way they could communicate was with handwritten letters to share their thoughts, their concerns, their worries, and their hopes, because phone calls were too expensive and email wouldn't exist for another 25 years. After that separation, our family was back together. And for the next 10 months, we lived the life of military family adventures in the tropical Pacific. Every few weeks, Dad would fly from Clark to Tan Son Nhut and Da Nang air bases in Vietnam. He would execute orders for bombing missions over North Vietnam, and then he'd fly 2 hours back home, and we'd resume our Ozzie and Harriet lifestyle of the mid and early 1960s. In June of 1965, Dad and his pilot, Charlie Lovelace, were lost while on a bombing mission over the Ho Chi Minh Trail on the border of North Vietnam and Laos. Mom was 27 then. She had 4 kids and another on the way. It kind of sounds like a country music song, another on the way. And 7,500 miles from home with her husband missing in a jungle someplace in a land far, far away. Hastily, the Air Force moved us back to San Pedro, and we carried on. Though Dad and Charlie Lovelace were held as missing in action from June of '65 until March of '69, Mom was always prepared and frankly expecting the worst possible outcome. We lost Mom a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And throughout her life, she maintained a vigil for Bill Cordero, an enduring love for the United States of America, and a deep admiration for our nation's armed forces. In 1989, I was at the center of efforts to form our nation's very first nonprofit dedicated to representing America's Gold Star children. That organization is called Sons and Daughters in Touch. And for the past 35 years, through Sons and Daughters in Touch, these Gold Star children, who are now in their 50s and 60s, have carried on the legacies of their fathers, forged lifelong bonds with each other, and with America's Gold Star families from World War II, the Korean War, and with Gold Star families from wars and conflicts that took place after Vietnam. It's unfathomable that such an organization didn't exist until 1989. But Sons and Daughters in Touch set a standard that many other well-known organizations have followed since then. One success I'm particularly proud of is that in 2003, SDIT, Sons and Daughters in Touch, led the nation's largest ever Gold Star pilgrimage to Vietnam. For 2 weeks, 50 Gold Star sons and daughters ventured from Saigon to Hanoi to see the exact places where their fathers gave their last full measure. One of those, a local connection for you, one of the participants in that trip was a woman named Barbara Shields. Barbara Shields is the Gold Star daughter of Marvin Shields, the Navy Seabees' only Medal of Honor recipient, and he is remembered at the Seabee Museum there in Oxnard. What all Gold Star families have imbued in them is commitment and loss and honor. A commitment to uphold the ideals of our nation and an oath to serve in the military. A loss on foreign shores in conflicts and in hostilities, and a promise to forever honor the legacies of our nation's war dead. Just a few weeks ago, I chaperoned a group of Vietnam War Gold Star children from Sons and Daughters in Touch on a city adventure to Nashville. The excursion was hosted by the Gary Sinise Foundation, and on our final day there, we visited the foundation's offices. In a surprise, Lieutenant Dan, Gary Sinise, made a surprise appearance to tell those Gold Star families that he and his foundation still care. As many of you know, it was Gary and Moira Sinise, along with partnership with the Reagan Foundation and the Woody Williams Foundation, who made this Gold Star Family Memorial possible. There's now 134 of these around the nation, and another 50 are in development. But at this monument's dedication, and as Melissa mentioned, in November of 2018, I presented Gary with a Gold Star Families Challenge coin from Sons and Daughters in Touch. And a couple weeks ago, while we were there together at his offices in Nashville, Gary and I had a really cool moment seeing that same coin among 3,500 others on a table in his conference room for all of the great work that Gary and his foundation have ever done. And I just will say this. If you know Gary Sinise, you'll agree with me. Everything said about Gary Sinise and his foundation is an understatement. They are absolutely phenomenal people. In fact, would you please give it up for the Gary Sinise Foundation? I don't need to remind you why we have Memorial Day. You know. It's why you're here. It's what you're here for. It's who you came to remember. We remember them as America's war dead, or the fallen, or those who paid the ultimate sacrifice and gave that last full measure of devotion. And by being here, we are carrying on the meaning and message and the history of Memorial Day in a tribute to those who gave their last full measure and in service to the United States. Among everything President Reagan said in his 1989 farewell address to the nation, two lines stand out to me. First, when talking about remembering the accomplishments of America's heroes and those who built this great nation, President Reagan said, "If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are." So don't forget them. And today, as you remember our nation's fallen, those who gave their lives and paid that ultimate sacrifice, remember their Gold Star families too. You know, more than 90% of all of America's Gold Star families receive that identification upon losing a loved one in wars and conflicts prior to 9/11. So when others propose legislative changes to the Department of Defense Gold Star designation in an attempt to expand the criteria or create potentially millions of new Gold Star families with the simple stroke of a pen, the older Gold Star families, that 90%, they have a significant say in that decision. Frankly, I believe it should be the aspiration of our nation that we have no new Gold Star families, because that would signal that America is not losing her service members in wars and conflicts. No matter how far in the past or how recent the conflict, and no matter how young or how old the Gold Star families are today, the memories of their loved ones whose lives were cut short is seen in the glow of the Gold Stars that those families wear. So please remember the Gold Star mothers and fathers, the Gold Star wives and husbands, the Gold Star sisters and brothers, and the Gold Star sons and daughters. Melissa asked the Gold Star family members to rise once. I'm going to ask you to do it again. Would all Gold Star families members here in the audience please rise once again? Thank you. And that second line from President Reagan, as he said goodbye to the nation, he implored Americans to challenge each other, to learn and remember America's rich history and never forget the importance of days like today and the heroes we honor. About challenging each other like that, to know our nation's history and what it means to be an American, President Reagan simply said, that would be a very American thing to do. Thank you. I wish you a reflective, honor-filled, and patriotic Memorial Day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling those stories with us. So, if you are not aware, our keynote today was supposed to be United States Air Force Colonel Patricia Blassie, retired. Unfortunately, she actually had to cancel a few days ago due to a family emergency, but her story is so important, I still wanted to share it with you today. Having her with us today would have been such a special moment for us here at the Reagan Foundation. And to tell her story, we actually need to go back, and we need to hear President Reagan's words from 1984 when he spoke on Memorial Day at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
The unknown soldier who is returned to us today and whom we lay to rest is symbolic of all our missing sons. And we will present him with the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration that we can bestow. About him, we may well wonder, as others have. As a child, did he play on some street in a great American city? Or did he work beside his father on a farm out in America's heartland? Did he marry? Did he have children? Did he look expectantly to return to a bride? We'll never know the answers to these questions about his life. The unknown soldier.
So when President Reagan delivered these remarks in 1984, he was right to think that we would never know the answers to his questions. However, in 1998, thanks to DNA research, the soldier that was in the tomb of the unknown soldier on that day in 1984, when President Reagan delivered remarks, was identified as United States Air Force Lieutenant Michael Blassie. 26 years after he had passed away and 14 years after President Reagan had said those words, he was identified and was able to be returned to his family. What an incredible moment. I can't imagine the journey that his family went through. I know deep in my core that President Reagan would have loved to have known that his family would have been here today. So, Patricia, our thoughts are with you while you deal with why you are not here. And as we wrap up today's program, I did want to share a few things about some upcoming events that I thought you might be interested in. And two are coming up just next week, I believe, on June 5th and June 6th. We're going to gather on June 5th to commemorate the 20th anniversary of President Reagan's passing. Hard to believe it's been 20 years. It's a meaningful opportunity to reflect on the 40th president's legacy and its enduring impact to this day and beyond. We're going to begin the day with a special ceremony, and then we're going to hear from people in the Reagan administration talk about his domestic and foreign policies. And we're going to conclude the day with a fireside chat between Carol Thatcher, who's the daughter of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and Ben Mulroney, the son of Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. We're going to gather again one day later, which is a day that might be significant to many of you. June 6th is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It also happens to be the 40th anniversary of President Reagan's 40th anniversary speech on that day, when he gave his famous speech about the boys a point to hawk. We're going to hear from people who were with President Reagan in 1984 at that day, and we're also going to have keynote remarks from Dr. Condoleezza Rice. Tickets are actually only on sale for 2 more days, which is why I wanted to share this information with you, and you can learn more at reaganfoundation.org/events. The last thing I wanted to bring up is you might have noticed a construction site a little bit to my left, your right. We're going to be holding our annual July 4th ceremony and program here like we do every year. Just like this, it's free to attend. It's presidential lookalikes and live music and picnic games. But this year, we're also going to be unveiling our new Charters of Freedom Monument, which includes life-size replicas of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and a panel on the civil rights. And if you're here with us on July 4th, you can be here for the unveiling ceremony. So we're going to conclude today's program with President Reagan's remarks from that same 1982 speech I referenced earlier today. We must try to honor them, not for their sakes alone, but for our own. And if words cannot repay the debt we owe these men, surely with our actions we must strive to keep faith with them and with the vision that led them to battle and to final sacrifice. As we honor their memory today, let us pledge that their lives, their sacrifices, their valor shall be justified and remembered for as long as God gives life to this nation. And let us also pledge to do our utmost to carry out what must have been their wish, that no other generation of young men will ever have to share their experiences and repeat their sacrifices. Thank you to all for being with us today, and we will conclude today's program with the playing of God Bless America. God bless you all.